One. Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio, coverage of Fundraising Day 2012. We're hosted by the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Greater New York City chapter, and we're in Midtown Manhattan at the Marriott Marquis. My guest right now is Jay Frost. He is CEO of fundraisinginfo.com, and his seminar topic is a little provocative, not too provocative, curious, popping the question, moving from engagement to action online. Jay Frost, welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on and to meet finally. We've been connected through social networks for quite some time.
A long time.
A couple of years, I think. But now meeting face to face, and I'm really not too impressed, to be quite honest.
Actually, you look better than I imagined.
He's gracious, and I'm obnoxious. Let's see. Okay, so we want to engage people. People are already engaged with our nonprofit, with our charity, but we want to move them into giving online.
Oh, yes.
So we're going to have some time, but generally, what is our process for doing that? Asking them to
give,
go to the next level. And okay, so when we talk about engagement,
right,
at what level are they engaged, hypothetically?
Well, that does really range, right?
Okay.
Organizations are messaging all the time. They're out there talking to people about the good that they do. And they do that in different ways according to the scope and scale and their marketing plan. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's really a nice, rigorous plan, and sometimes it's haphazard. But fundamentally, we're engaging with organizations because we find something that they do appealing. Here's
even stronger than appealing. I mean, they move it. They move us.
Sure.
We love their work for some reason.
Well, yes. I mean, hopefully we do.
Yeah.
And we're right, especially in social media, to be talking about that kind of passion all the time. So I'm all for passion. But at some point, we've got to be, like the session title implies, at some point we've got to be willing to say, okay, well, I love you too, but now it's time to get together and compare notes and work on something together. So it's about asking people to make a commitment.
Okay. How do we begin to ask? How do we approach them?
Well, I think it's not dissimilar from all the other things we do in fundraising. It's just that a lot of social has been about marketing rather than sales. And so it's a matter of merging those two pieces instead of building a wall between them. I work with a number of organizations where they will build very large followings of people and talk about a lot of really important things, the work that they do every day, or they share scriptural quotes, or they will go in and look at a specific program in detail, share images from it. All these things are great. They really engage people. But then they fail to just take that one additional step and say, come on over to this page, here's a link, and then you can support this next year, next month, tomorrow.
So what's the reluctance? Why aren't we doing it more?
Well, I think part of it is because we've been given the wrong message for the last couple of years about what social media
should be and how far it can go.
Right. And in fact, there have been a lot of people that I like to call the gurus and ninjas, because they often refer to themselves as gurus and ninjas, who will say, you really have to build that passion first. We have to build the passion first. And I understand the emotion behind that. Here's the fundamental challenge. If we began every organization like that, none would survive. I mean, every organization needs to have today's equivalent of the sustaining gift, of the major grant, of the money given at the door, of some kind of purchase. If we fail to do that, we lose the ability to sustain our mission. And social is really no different from anything else in that regard, except that the audience is far larger and the acquisition cost is far lower.
Right. Okay, so we say the advice is ask, but we're accustomed to doing very different work, related but leading up to, but we're afraid to make the ask. Right. To convert someone into a donor. That's what we're talking about, right? Even and even a modest donor, maybe a $50 a year donor.
Right.
What's your advice? Let me ask it this way: does your advice vary based on whether we're asking through Facebook or we're asking our Twitter followers?
Well, I don't know that it would vary that much by the channel specifically. It might be by the kind of content we're sharing or the event itself or the ask itself. I guess what I'm saying is that we need to be willing to marry the different parts of the program. So instead of them operating in silos, we ought to find a way to, for example, have the email campaign fed by social.
So a part of this is organizational structure.
It's absolutely
organizational. We don't want marketing communications not to be talking to development and institutional advancement.
Right, absolutely. And in fact, I think a lot of times we've given the social aspect to people in IT because we saw it as somehow alien and complicated, or we've given it to the marketing department because we saw it as a channel for broadcasting. And while those the people in those skill areas are terrific, they have terrific skill sets, great contributions they make to organizations. We need to have somebody who's willing to actually say, okay, glad you love us. Now, would you be willing to support this activity? They need to be involved in all the messaging, all those components.
Okay. So who should be saying it?
Well, in that case, what we really need to do is have a social media department, which is made up of people who are the fundraisers.
Including fundraisers.
Yes.
All right, so we need to break down the organizational silos and also the conceptual silos about what social networks are for,
right,
and how far we can go with them.
And I've seen this pretty consistently. I went to a conference last year where it was a room full of people going to a session on social media that I was conducting, and we did a kind of a show of hands afterwards how many people had a fundraiser in the team that was responsible for the social media messaging, and it was less than 10%. And I saw something happen just recently at another conference, a very similar result. So I think that we have to find a way to marry these concepts very early in the program, and then we will use the technologies as the bridges between them. So that if, for example, we won't go to Facebook and just say, will you give today? We would say, here's the program that we've been talking about. It's really important. We need your support for it. Will you click this link and come over here and do so? So then we're going to use another platform to collect the information, to collect the donation in the same way that we do now through email or our website. So it's a process of moving from one place to another using the correct messaging within that context of that channel.
Okay, so let's talk a little more, even in more detail, so that people can start to activate themselves to break down their own preconceptions, misconceptions about this limitation around social media. What is a preferred method of doing that? Let's say on with Twitter followers. How might we start to get them? We're putting out bursts. They're very engaged. We've got a good number. Let's say we've got a couple thousand followers. But that's as far as we've gone, and we don't really know much about them other than that they're following us on Twitter. We don't know who they are beyond that.
Right.
How do we start to message?
Well, there are a whole bunch of elements there that are really interesting.
Okay.
One is that
I ask interesting questions all the time.
You do,
but I'm counting on you to give more
open-ended,
more interesting answers. So
where do I start? Which apple do I pick first?
Okay.
One part is about knowing who the donors are.
Let's focus on how do we get more information about who our 2,000 Twitter followers are.
Right, exactly. Well, there are a couple ends to that. One is, of course, when we go and when we have an existing following, we can start researching those people by simply looking at their profiles and then connecting that to other kinds of profiles. For example, their web pages, their LinkedIn pages, and we're going to learn quite a good deal about them. A bigger challenge right now is finding information on people already in our file who are on these social channels, but we don't know that they are there. And there are some tools now to do that. There are a couple of companies. Unfortunately, I don't think they're in the hall here today, but there are a couple of companies.
You can name them. It's okay.
Well, I know one is Small Act, for example.
Small Act, which
what they do is they will take a file of email addresses and they will then append the social handles. So instead
wonderful.
Yes. So instead of just trying to figure out who might be on Facebook and then say, will you post something for us, you find out the people who have the greatest influence, and then you reach out to them directly.
Now, can we give listeners another company that does that, just to give them a choice? Do you know another one? Or
I would, but I'm forgetting the name right now, and there are only two. But I'd be happy to tell anybody if they contact me after, or
or if it occurs to you in the next 15 minutes or so.
I'll let you know.
just shout out. I mean, I shout out random thoughts all the time.
I'll do that.
So you're invited to do that as well. Listeners know that it's mostly randomized. What other advice? I mean, you said now it's not really channel specific, but you said my question opened up a whole bunch of Interesting topic. So
Right.
now we know more about who the people are.
Right.
What else was interesting?
Well, another piece of that is, how are people actually raising money? I mean, are they raising money by direct, if they are raising money at all, are they doing it by direct ask or by empowering people to ask on their behalf? Clearly, the answer is number 2.
Yes.
So an example that's very easy now is Charity Water. Charity Water has been very successful in having people donate their birthdays, where a person will say, I would like to, instead of giving me birthday presents this year, will you go to my form, make a gift for Charity Water to bring potable water to people who don't have any. Mm-hmm. And that's been very successful. They've raised, I understand, over $45 million to date. They are now embarking on a $1 billion campaign. So I think fundamentally what they're doing right, and it's been done by other organizations, is by empowering their donors to use some tools offline and use the social environment to go out and spread that message with those links to their pages.
Charity Water also happens to be very good about showing impact.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a big piece. Obviously, on the programmatic side, they're showing that your dollars can make a direct impact.
Yes.
But even when it's not quite as tangible, I think organizations have done very well in these ways. Another example that I use today is something like Humane Society. The Humane Society of the United States. What are they doing that's right in this context? They again have causes page, so people can make a donation. That way, they have their own contribution pages, etc. So they're driving traffic to these places so people can make a donation. But really, what they're doing is they're fostering that relationship and empowering the donor. And one really basic level is to go and react and respond and engage with every single person who posts something. So if you were to go right now and send a tweet to somebody at the Humane Society, you're going to get a response.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any other charity in America that does that.
Okay. And for small and mid-sized shops, that could be very challenging. I mean, they just don't have do they?
Well, let me push back on that. We've had that conversation for a long time in fundraising about the thank you call. And a lot of us know Jerry Panis, who talks about this stuff. And I've done some sessions with him at Institute for Charitable Giving this last year. It was a lot of fun because he has so much history and so much experience with different organizations. And he often tells a story.
For listeners who don't know, his last name is spelled Panas.
Yes.
And you'll see it either as Jerry or usually Gerald.
Yes.
With a J.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, please.
Lots of books to his credit, et cetera, et cetera. But he talks about these organizations that decide to thank their donors by phone. And this is long before social media. So just at what level do you pick up the phone and just say thank you?
Yeah. And
so he was talking with a few organizations about this and the importance of making I think he said a thank you phone call to everybody who gives at least $1,000. And one person said, well, we do it for everybody who gives 100. And he thought that was great, of course. So he said, well, how do you do it? And that's terrific. And they said, well, actually we do. And I think they said about 56,000 like this a year.
Oh, okay.
56,000 phone calls.
Big organization.
It's a big organization, but here's the question. Why are they big? I would argue that the reason why they're large is because they build that level of engagement because they thank everyone. Because the most important thing, as the person had told Jerry and the rest of the group, what is there that's more important than saying thank you? And the reason I mention this in the social media context is because in social media, that's exactly the currency. If you say something great, I retweet it. And that means that I think it has value and I care. And you probably care that I've done that.
Yeah.
But institutionally, we have failed at that. We will often broadcast really good content that we think is in the interest of our constituents, but we haven't been very good about saying, wow, thank you for sharing this content, or that was a really great thing that you said. We really appreciate your carrying our baton. It's very easy to do. I've been mystery shopping at nonprofits on Twitter for the past couple years.
Yes.
Where I'll go and I'll post content about them, oftentimes with their handle, to see what they'll say. And this is various things. They have a job opening, they have a gift that's been made to them, they're posted some terrific content, and then I'll wait to see what they say. Now, I've done this to organizations I know nothing about. I don't know anyone there.
Right,
I've done it with organizations I know but haven't given to, and I've done it with organizations where I give, including a couple where they're in my will and they know it. And I would have to say that at least 99% of the time, there is zero response to anything that I've posted about them. And really, that's just like the thank you. Why not decide to make a mental shift and simply say that, well, we don't have all day to sit around and say thank you. We can take 10% of our day on social to say, we're going to talk with people in a way that tells them that we care.
And that's actually an outstanding example, including, especially, I think, the ones that you have in your will, and they know it. I mean, there isn't a closer relationship, and they're not monitoring their social networks to see that you're commenting on the relationship, and they should be commenting back.
Right, and part of that, of course, is infrastructure. That the person who's working on that social account is not
pushing
in the fundraising department.
Pushing and not looking.
And it's not their fault. I mean,
it's their job to create content, but not to monitor what's coming back,
or to monitor the relationships with donors, because their job is all about the content. It's not about the donor relationships. But no donors, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. Yeah. That's my philosophy on fundraising.
All right. I'm just going to open it up sort of generally. I mean, other advice that charities can execute for. I mean, that's a pretty simple one. Monitor your channel. Monitor your name across all the networks that you're on.
That's right.
And respond when the name is someone that should be recognizable to you. I mean, so sort of cross-check. What other simple advice like that?
Well, you can use the same philosophy to try and gather new donors, or at least new constituents, new interested parties. So it goes beyond the kind of follow the followers, or follow the followers thing, to looking for people who are talking about the things that matter to you. So in the case of the kind of things that that is our currency, maybe it's philanthropy, or if I'm at a cancer organization, to look at people who are mentioning cancer, and then to reach out to them directly and talk about what is of interest to them, to applaud the kinds of things that they're posting. And that's going to drive traffic back to you. I mean, I think it has a direct economic effect. But it also has a way of showing them that we're really authentic in what we're doing. We're not just selling something, which I think should be appealing to the people right now who are monitoring our channels. The folks who are largely managing our social media right now have their heart in the right place, which is to say they care that we're having an honest and authentic conversation. The problem is that they aren't necessarily in a position to have it with the people who are the most invested with our causes. Yeah. So if we can improve that, and then give them some incentive, direction, encouragement to go out and try to find more people who care about the same things, we could really broaden our audience. Another piece that's of great interest to me is about global fundraising. Organizations in the United States have been largely focused on domestic fundraising forever, and that's been for very practical reasons. If you live in New York, there's a lot of opportunity in New York, so maybe you'd go outside of the tri-state area. If you live in California and you have a national charity, maybe you'll reach out to New York and perhaps Texas and Chicago and D.C. and a couple places, Florida. But you're going to stop in the places that you know, where you have a critical mass of donors, and a lot of that is driven by where you can travel and who you have addresses for. Here's the thing about global social media, is that if I post something now, a person in Beirut could read as easily as a person in Boston or Tokyo, as well as Texas. So if we start trying to send messages out in a way that says we're welcoming not just the people here who care about this stuff, but we're really welcoming everyone, we have the opportunity to completely expand our audience for our work. And because we aren't inhibited by those addresses, because of the mail, there's really nothing inhibiting us from continuing to steward these donors once we activate them or empower them. And that's, again, why we need to have stewardship, and solicitation is always a piece of this fabric, because otherwise we'll never have the opportunity to say, great, glad you liked us, can you come over here and support us? And the same thing is true domestically. We've for a long time been focused on donors who kind of look like our boards of the past, and that's been a pretty homogeneous place. But today, because of the nature of social media and its audience, it's so widely diverse, especially in the audiences that are going to become more and more the biggest part of the American fabric in the next few years, that we have an opportunity to talk to them right now in a way that we never could have with our list 10 years ago.
Right, you wouldn't have had the access.
Right.
Jay, we have to leave it there.
Great.
Jay Frost, a pleasure. He is CEO of fundraisinginfo.com. Pleasure to have you as a guest.
It's great to be here.
Thanks. Tony Martignetti. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Tony Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of the Fundraising Day Conference 2012 in New York City. Our host is the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Greater New York City chapter. Jay, thanks again.